I live in United States, Minnesota, and I'm vice president of Association for Study of Language and Prehistory. And I have been Estamos listos. Sí. I have been interested in Basque for over 20 years. So at the end of the handout, there's some information about my book and my homepage, the Tower of Babel homepage from Russia, and the Mother Tongue homepage. And everything I say, well, much of what I say here is available in the internet on those three websites. So at the beginning, this is the question: how do we discover the origin and history of and the prehistory of a language, even when there are no written records of earlier stages? And the answer I give, we can do an analysis of the following components. These are basic vocabulary, lexicon. The second one is morphology, or grammar. The third one is phonology, which is sound systems. And the fourth one is, I call cultural vocabulary. And in most languages, at least in, say in Europe and Asia, the cultural vocabulary consists of several layers, reflecting periods of contact with other speakers of other languages. And these words are borrowed to fill a gap in the borrowing language. So the first three of these, which is basic vocabulary, morphology, and phonology, tell us about the genetic origin of a language, while the last one, cultural vocabulary, tells us about cultural contacts. And what I mean by genetic is the inherited language that is learned from parents and other people in your family. And it's this is the genetic origin, so I'm going to stress this distinction between basic vocabulary and cultural vocabulary. So basic vocabulary consists of words with meanings that are common to all cultures. So, for example, names of parts of the body, eye, ear, hand, foot, the basic elements of nature, the earth, water, fire, wind, sun, star, moon, etc. basic verbs that every language has, to die, to eat, to drink, to give, to know, and pronouns, the words we use instead of nouns, so I, you, this, that, who, what. All these are examples of basic words, also known as core vocabulary. So when you take away the loan words that are borrowed from other languages, you're left with, usually with this core, a central part of the vocabulary. Then on the other hand, cultural vocabulary consists of words for cultural items and behaviors. So for example, items you acquire in trade, paper, papel, etc., in European languages usually come ultimately from Egyptian, because they originated the papyrus process of making paper. And another one is tea, which in most languages outside of China come from Chinese, because people needed a new word to denote this new product. Another category is religious terms. Church, in English, comes ultimately from Greek, and iglesia and Elisa and Basque and Castilian come from a different Greek word. And so wherever as Christianity spread, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew words have been borrowed by the languages. Another category is exotic animals or foods, animals that do not live in every country, or we borrow the name. So elephant or tiger or monkey are borrowed words in all European languages. And similarly with foods, foods and drinks that come from other countries, we borrow the word pizza or hummus or coffee. And another category is new cultural styles. So jazz is spread around the world, tango, skyscraper. And sometimes these words are translated into, so rascacielos is translation from English. So because basic core vocabulary is less likely to be borrowed from other languages, and basic words often remain in a given language for thousands of years, it gives us clues to the genetic origin of a language. Cultural vocabulary, on the other hand, is much more likely to be borrowed, so it tells us about contacts with foreign languages. So we'll give some examples from Castilian. So the basic words for eye, ear, tongue, sun, moon, earth, drink, to know, I and you, and so on and so forth, come from Vulgar Latin, the language spoken in the Roman Empire. Oculu, auricula, lingua, sole, luna, terra, bibere, sapere, ego, tu. These words and many others have persisted with phonetic changes throughout the 2,200-year history of Latin and the daughter languages, which are called Romance languages. Antonio mentioned the Romance languages. There are also elements that do not go back to Vulgar Latin. And most of them, I think, are cultural vocabulary. The cultural vocabulary of Castilian is in several layers. The first layer that came with the Roman Empire is the Vulgar Latin words for table, key, and book, from mensa, clave, and libru. I'm sorry if I mispronounce these words. Another layer, izquierdo, chamarra, niño, cachorro, chico, seem to come from Basque or Iberian. These were words contributed by the people who stopped speaking Iberian and Basque and started speaking Vulgar Latin and languages that later became Romance languages. Another group, Bosque, Javon, Yelmo, Guerra, come from Germanic, various waves of Germanic people who invaded or lived in Iberia. And then there's a very big layer, comes from Arabic, aceituna, hasta, sumo, ole, and many others, is well known, come from Arabic during the Moorish occupation of Iberia. So their examination of the basic vocabulary and the cultural vocabulary of Castilian leads us to these conclusions, that the core or basic vocabulary shows that the language originated from Vulgar Latin, while the cultural vocabulary indicates contacts with other cultures, Basque, Iberian, what we call substratum, also Celts, Germanic tribes, Arabs, Moors, and others. This kind of layering of cultural vocabulary is very common. For example, English is basically a West Germanic dialect that was transported to England. And then subsequent to that, important layers have come from Scandinavian or North Germanic languages and French. Those are the major layers other than West Germanic. And some others, Latin, Greek, and many others. But these are all cultural words that were borrowed by English. So, the basic vocabulary, morphology,